Good morning, Avi. Thank you for in doing this session here with CARPL. Uh, I know you personally for quite long now, but for the other people here, would you like to introduce yourself a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, thank you for having me. My name is Sharma. I'm a body radiologist and I serve as director of AI at Jefferson Einstein Hospitals. So within that role, I manage to deploy our AI solutions from curation, selecting them, and implementing them into our workflow, as well as monitoring their performance. And so that is partially as to why the reason Carl and I are working together. So that's exactly the component of monitoring and deployment that is very near.
Thank you. Uh, Avi, uh, as we know, Jefferson Einstein Hospital is probably the most artificially intelligent hospital, I would say. You know, so I think you have several AI systems running parallelly. And when we go to enterprise systems and have this conversation about getting AI deployed, we get a lot of pushback. Couple of reasons. The first reason is the type of governance that these systems follow. Nobody wants to take the responsibility of passing that governance, taking that risk, spending time on it, and nobody has a vision to look forward on how could they be able to leverage AI into that practice. How were you able to do this? How did you bring so many systems? How did this start? Where are you now? And how many systems are there you're using in your practice?
It's a great point, and it's really important, especially because we're in this very early dynamic phase of learning and better understanding how AI can make an impact. So ultimately, for us, we've always been an institution that has always tried to live at the cutting edge and forefront when it comes to AI. It predates my time, even when I joined a few years back. But ultimately, we saw the potential of AI, and that leads to the culture. It's believing that there is a potential value in AI. When you find those like-minded people and you start getting together, that's the organic governance that we ended up developing. And now you're seeing a lot of literature and a lot of conversation talking about it because ultimately there are a lot of senior leaders at institutions that don't really understand AI and its capabilities. And ultimately establishing this governance framework in order to vet solutions, determine their potential impact, measure it, and then determine if there's a ROI financially, patient care improvement. That all takes time. And ultimately, for larger institutions, that conversations can be many years. So for us, we're quite further along in that stage. So we've created essentially a smaller, tight knit governance, essentially like a dream team of folks where we talk about, okay, here's the AI here's the imaging life cycle. Let's think about all the different ways AI can impact from ordering an exam to scheduling it to image acquisition as a scanner level, and then image interpretation. That goes on to reporting and follow-up. Understanding that, image interpretation was the first scope in the wheel that got the most attention, so many different opportunities. So we're constantly striving and looking for those opportunities. And at to date, we're over a dozen companies deployed with over 30 AI solutions. And it led to the fact that once we did one, it was in essence a domino effect where if we learned, if we fail, we succeeded, and we learned that roadmap as to what works or what doesn't. And from there, it allows us to find new solutions in a more thoughtful way and employ them more.
So if I just put it down simply, it comes from the top, right? There is a leadership that has that vision and it kind of leads and the every department follows it through. If I flip it, right, this is a top-down approach. It comes from the leadership. Do you think is there an opportunity for a bottoms-up approach? What I mean to say that is that there is a movement among residents, fellows who come together and see we want to try out this AI, test this AI. Let's take it to the leadership, right? Do you think space or an opportunity like that exists in many US organizations? If not, uh, does it even exist in private practice? Have you seen it? Whatever exposure you have to the private practice.
It's a good point. And ultimately, what you're describing is a grassroots campaign where people that are in the front lines, what they're using, describing their pain points, and drumming up the enthusiasm and energy to actually get something moving. So ultimately, you are right. So whether it's trainees that know that AI is going to be a part of their future and you should start using it now so they can learn and fail as they are as trainees, right? To learn, see where their gaps are with knowledge wise or group detection. The same way in a trainee phase, I'm a believer that you should start using AI as soon as you can, because then you can understand what its capabilities are and what it can accomplish, how you fit into that. But what I've seen, especially at our institution, and I'm always educating our residents think about AI, is you need to drum up the interest from bottoms up, as you said, and speak to your superiors and the seniors to say, hey, we really need to get this AI solution or this on your radar. Because honestly, there's still this fear of the unknown and the ability of it's making an impact. And right now, AI is it's a line item expense for every practice right now. Formal reimbursement isn't all the way there yet. And I can say we are eventually going to make our way there. But right now, it's about making the claim, is this a nice to have or a need to have? And definitely proving that it is improving our patient throughput or workflow. And there are potentially financial benefits from having the solution. But capturing and measuring that data is the data then you bring to your C-suite and your leadership and say, hey, we have proven this has worked for us. And you have full confidence that if you do invest money and time into this, you're going to get the ROI back.
So we, as we are a two-way platform, we do on one side interact very well with the AI companies and the hospitals. One of the strong beliefs that all these AI companies have today, in fact, two of them. The first one is their AI solutions are mature and they're as good as radiologists. The only reason that hospitals not willing to try them out is that they are kind of threatened, feeling threatened. That's one belief. The first belief is they are at the pinnacle of performance. The second belief is there is a resistance from radiologists for adoption. So that's one side of the problem. The other side of the problem, like I'm sure you must have been part of many of these leadership meetings wherein you, Dr. Lee, go and talk to the hospital leadership, meets them to bring an AI. I've heard it from other organizations. One of the pushbacks that comes from the institutional leadership is, uh, you, for example, a lung nodule CT solution, right? Uh, Dear doctor, we are paying you for finding that very nodule. Why do you think would pay an AI in addition to paying you for doing the same thing that you're supposed to do? I'm sure you've navigated these, the broad spectrum of issues. How did you address it? How do you think other institutions should address it?
It's a good question. And I'll use your lung nodule CT detection as an example. So, what you describe is early detection of lung nodules that may result in cancer. Now, back in the day, we didn't have as many thin slice imaging cuts that we had once upon a time, but quite often our chest CTs these days, they have over 1,000 to 3,000 images. Given the fact that there's so many reformations that they do, ultimately you're asking a radiologist to pop out exam after exam and find the needle in a haystack over and over and over again. So ultimately, there is inevitable fatigue that happens for radiologists. To err is human. And what ultimately happens is that nodules get missed. And ultimately, whether they're clinically significant or not is up for debate. And ultimately, that some are suspicious than others. But ultimately, based on guidelines and recommendations, we are forced to then abide by these guidelines and flag said nodules. Ultimately, a lung nodule CT detection software, what is it doing? Well, essentially, you have like a 2000 image series deck. It's able to flag the important findings, one, the nodules, then describe their anatomic location, and even comments on whether it's grown or changed at all. That to be able to grade something as benign or malignant in an expeditious way, well, ultimately, you've done two things. One, you've reduced the fatigue for the radiologist to now take on the next case. and no longer use any headspace on just trying to find nodules, but also your turnaround times improving, getting these reports out faster, and allows the radiologist to tackle the next exam on the list. So yes, there's more of an invisible ROI and time more innately. Yes, you're spending less time on the lung nodules, and now you're spending more time on the next patient with more energy and focus, so that you can actually accomplish your entire job. So ultimately, it's a matter of measuring those metrics, and that's what I do at our institution, right? Proving the ROI. So what you described, finding nodules, if I can show that a radiologist pre-implementation and post-implementation is now reading chest CTs faster, well, that it allows for the radiologist to then read more minutes, see more visually.
Around the AI companies, how do you deal with them, right? I'm sure many of these AI companies reach out to you, almost every one of them, but you can choose some of them. So the others are still left with a belief that you are reluctant to use it, right? So that's, I don't know how you handle them. In fact, the other thing I wanted to ask it as follow-up question is you kind of probably teach a lot of these residents and fellows. At least 4 or 5 years back, when I made a switch from a practicing radiology to full-time AI, there was a real threat perception of no jobs getting replaced by AI. People saw through it. And then who claimed radiologists should be you know, stopped. The hospital should stop training radiologists. He went on to get Nobel Prize, but none of the radiologists got replaced. What I'm sensing now with the success of the generative AI models, especially the uber powerful chat GPT, you see the threat perception coming again. Do you feel that there is going to be real threat around this time for radiologists, at least for some of those chest x-rays, MSK x-rays, honestly that.
Yeah, all great questions. And I guess before I get into the education component, and your first question about how we meet with vendors and how we decide on what to implement. Ultimately, every one vendor relationship that we establish, we set aside goals of what we want to measure and what the benefit is for the company as well as for us. Everything needs to be mutually beneficial. And ultimately, as a veteran collaborator, we know what we need in far as gas that we can accomplish in our imaging lifecycle. And collaborators need to have proof of concept, right? Especially at a US hospital, showing what they developed and what's in actual practice. So understanding and measuring those endpoints at the very beginning, that has been a fruitful, good standardization template to ensure that people actually win from both sides. We get to try new technologies, and we will name and fame you appropriately if it ends up being a great asset for us. Accordingly, that ends up lending well to speaking to our enterprise ECC conversations to say, hey, we've already used it. You love it, so you should invest. Now, that's one component, and that's kind of the framework that we always use with any AI solution you have now. Now, pivoting over to just trainees and just more broadly speaking about perception of AI and what it can bring to the table. Now, as you alluded to Jeffrey Hinton said to comment of, to stop training radiologists, they're looking down the cliff and they don't know what's coming ahead. Well, obviously that didn't happen. And it was, 5-10 years ago now. And he revised his comment because he essentially said, I underestimated what was ending up going to happen and I overestimated how quickly it would happen. Well, I can say now that AI has become more commonplace, I think society at large is now incorporating AI, and it's not just within medicine, but it's just every finance, technology, auto industries. It's everywhere. The fact that it's become more normalized, I do think that the fear mongering and spelling the capabilities of it, people are getting more grounded in what it can and cannot do. I think everyone at some point has played around with ChatGPT or some other software and, maybe create a confounded output. Now, it's fun in games when you're playing with ChatGPT, but you essentially want to develop something that's perfect all the time. We're not there yet. I think that, over time, when we zoom out, we'll eventually get there, but especially more so in medical imaging, right? A medical medicine in general. Are you going to trust AI to do everything autonomously without any human in the loop to ensure things work correctly? I could say now, I do not believe that we're anywhere near that where we are confident for something to work autonomously. But think about the grander scheme of working with AI, allowing you to spending more time and energy on endeavors that are worth it. You've now seen with some NLP solutions that are helping us automate the impressions of our report, and that, of course, reduces the report turnaround time. That's a benefit. And now you've seen some models that are able to flag solutions as negative, positive, and appropriately triage them so we can address them more quickly. Or if they're negative, we can sign them off quicker if we feel confident in some output. These are, again, adjuncts to our workflow and how we do things. And we can get into a whole debate about medical legalese, about how there's a lot of liability that comes into play and who owns the liability. Is it vendor? Is it the hospital? Is it the radiologist signing off the report? And as it is right now, I mean, malpractice exists for radiologists for this exact reason, because to err is human, and in allowing these AI tools to help us create sort of a safety net at the bottom of us through our workday, so we're not walking into work every day in fear of missing something that might bite us in the future. That alleviating those fear concerns, I think it will go a long way as far as overall how happiness felt radiologists.
Yeah, nice. So, yeah, just shifting gears, the IT departments at hospitals always seem to be busy, right? They are always changing something. Either they're changing the epic, upgrading the epic, changing the packs, bringing in new systems, QC systems, or maybe other into the comprehensive. How do you convince them to spend their time on something which has no defined outcome? There is no promise of the deploying an AI. How do you convince them to work on this?
That's a hard question. And ultimately, it's because in our existing culture and framework, the IT team has so many more priorities, and AI is just another one that's on top of it. And ultimately, operations are more important, right? The radiologist simply can't have the images deployed at a workstation, or unable to sign off reports or communicate findings. All those necessary steps cannot be fallen to the wayside while we try and deploy something at AI. The thing is, I think that there needs to be more dedicated resources to deploy AI, having a separate resource that can solely focus on that so that these other balls that they're juggling aren't falling away. I think ultimately that's why you get a cold response with IT, because they're saying, listen, we're already stretched very thin. We had no bandwidth to now deploy this extra credit, extracurricular AI solution because I barely have enough resourcing and staffing to keep the lights on. So what I guess the analogy would be like, why overdo it when you put the cherry on top, but you don't even have the ice cream in the first place? So it's like, first, make sure you have a well-oiled system when it comes to IT infrastructure, and then you can slowly, in a more judicious way, start adding these solutions. But ultimately, it comes down to resource staffing. If the IT department is saying we're barely hanging on by a thread and we're at the brink of our packs, our IT are risk going into downtime, no one's going to be able to misdo it. So I encourage IT teams to start finding either staffing within their department that are willing to take on this endeavor, or getting more formalized certification, create a roadmap so that implementation isn't so cumbersome, because it isn't easy. There's a lot of time and energy that's put in. You yourselves have become very intimately familiar with our IT team because you guys are working behind the scenes to figure out the types, to make everything happen. Mm. Never any battle. Also,
So, what final now you're very well. Ah, Karamapu, yeah. One final question to close it out. I don't know if you're already doing it. So Jefferson has the data. We have the best domain experts. Probably when hire a couple of data scientists. Why don't you build your own AI? Do you want to do that? Are you already doing that? Is it in Python?
it's a great question. Ultimately, we're going to ask you why export this and ask the third party to accomplish something we can do in house. It's a valid point, but what I've seen, especially within all these grown solutions, the toughest issue is that people use their local data and it doesn't generalize very well. So when I've seen models being built, while you can do all the necessary information for that model to work well at your institution, it's going to be brittle. And even if you created it off of accurate cases, Sure, it may work for a couple months, maybe even a year, but unless there's continuous data being put in to make sure that the model is fine tuned and remodeled, it's eventually going to fail. And so what you're suggesting is that, oh, why don't you build something in house and then manage and monitor it in perpetuity? Well, now you're asking someone to manage something that requires a lot of time and energy. And whether you're asking radiologists who are already busy interpreting imaging, or again, you're asking IT staff, or hey, perhaps you can get trainees at it as an academic center, but as private practice, they're already operating in margin. So it's impossible to ask them to start dedicating resources for a model that, again, is it maybe a nice to have, but not a need to have. So ultimately, I feel like it might be a great overarching goal to try and do it in house, but it ends up requiring a lot more time and energy that no one has. So sometimes it's just not worth trying to outstream. But that said, I will give a caveat. As you see now, especially surrounding this and many other goods, foundational models are becoming more and more present. So our ability to have open source foundational models will then allow people to build off that model and then create a specific use case for themselves at their own institution. That I think is going to be the avenue in which people can start doing this more robustly because they no longer have to do someone who's already done 90% of the work. Now you're just doing that last 10%. And even the model fine tuning and monitoring, I think, is an easier endeavor because then you're just going to keep porting new cases. We're not there yet. So I'll give pause and say that until institutions have tried and failed a lot more in regards to actually building your own AI models, you still have a ways to go. And it's better to collaborate with existing companies, vendors, practices that have a robust data set built across the entire world that it can generalize well, and you can get into actual clinical practice. And just one last point that comes into all of this is that you can build a model in house and it can work and its performance can be fantastic. But if you haven't thought about the radiologist workflow and how to embed that tool into their workflow, whether it's UI, whether it's the way that you can easily interpret the data, there's no way that everyone's going to use it. If it requires you to open up a third-party application or in somewhere form, keep your eyes off the image, you're going to lose a lot of buy-in for radiologists as far as using the product. So that's an important component that again requires time and energy and UI experience that I don't know everyone necessarily has at institutions.
Yeah, the takeaway is that if the question is build or buy, at least till foundation models show their value, it's going to be buy. But if foundation models takes off, it could be build.
Did I? Exactly. Well,
Oh, thank you, Avi. Any questions from anyone in the audience? Thank you so much for doing that.